You're listening to Succeed, Just Let Go, a podcast that'll change how you think and change your life. I'm Willie Horton and I'm a psychologist, been helping people change their lives since 1996. Broadcasting from the French Alps and delighted to have you along. Let's take this week's step in the right direction.
Over the last few episodes, we have talked a lot about creating the life that you'd want, building your self-esteem, boosting your productivity. We've talked about all those things in terms of taking control of your own state of mind. All of the titles to those episodes that I've just mentioned are obviously of a positive nature. And yet so many people email me and say that their life, when they wake up most mornings, doesn't look like that at all. People are stressed. People are fearful. And I don't mean fearful in terms of what's happening on a global scale at the moment. I mean, they're just afraid to get out of bed, to go to work, or to do whatever they have to do. Many people's lives are darker, or at least they think they are, than the lives that we have been talking about creating in the most recent episodes of this podcast. Somebody said to me, I need to bring these podcast episodes back down to reality. Now, the reality of how the world really works has been explained in the last few episodes. That when we take control of our state of mind, when we change our perspective, for starters, our perspective of ourselves changes. And that itself, on its own, is life-changing. But that's only the beginning. Because when we do take control of our state of mind, when we do begin to see things differently, when we obviously see ourselves differently, when we begin to perceive reality in a different way, everything changes. Because, as we've said quite recently, it's been known for donkey's ears that we perceive what we expect to perceive, and consequently, we achieve what we expect to achieve. Now, if you change your expectation, if you change your perspective or perception of what's going on in the here and now, never mind your expectation, if you change how you see yourself and your world right here, right now, everything is going to change. And that means that you can begin to choose what kind of life and lifestyle you would like to have. So when people say to me, as they have, that you need to bring things back down to reality, what I actually respond is that they're going back into the world of thought. That has nothing to do with reality. On the other hand, of course, we create our reality based on what's going on in our own head. So your version of reality may be very dark indeed, but it's only your version of reality. It has nothing to do with how the world really works. Now, I've talked about fear. Some people have emailed me about panic. I've talked about things looking darker rather than the way in which we've been talking about them over the last couple of episodes. But these conversations that I'm having with people by email at the moment put me in mind of a review that I got for what was, when I started out doing this in 1996, a 3-day face-to-face workshop. There might have been 6 or 7 participants in each of those workshops. That's obviously been superseded by the online program, the Psychology of Success online program, which has been running now since 2018 and has program owners all over the world. But one of the very first people with whom I worked many years ago wrote me an unsolicited email after his 3-day workshop, and the heading on his email was the title of this week's podcast episode: The Waste of Worry. What he started off by saying was, I spent 3 days with Willie Horton, and he taught me the waste of worry. I mentioned fear. I mentioned panic a couple of minutes ago. I've mentioned how people see the world darker rather than they might perceive it if they were actually in charge of their own state of mind. And now we've talked about worry. Worry, fear, panic, all these negative things that we've just mentioned are all on what might be considered to be the thought spectrum. Some people are low down on the thought spectrum. They just have little niggles going on in their own head all of the time. Indeed, if you've been listening to this podcast for quite some time, you will know that the average normal crazy person has 70,000 of those niggles whizzing through their head every day. Now, because of the way the mind works on automatic pilot, uh, I should clarify that, because of the way the mind works when you are not in charge of your own state of mind, it works on automatic pilot. Because of that, generally speaking, normal crazy people aren't aware of those 70,000 little niggles. But it's the 70,000 little niggles that drag us down and enable us do little more than make it through the day. You must remember from previous conversations that evolution has given us a brain that is designed to enable us to survive, enable us to make it through the day, not enable us to achieve great things or enjoy ourselves or have the kind of life or lifestyle that our heart desires. When you take control of your state of mind, you are in a position to achieve great things. You are in a position to transform the ordinary of your everyday life into extraordinary. You are in a position to create a kind of reality that your heart desires, whereby you have the life and lifestyle and everyday life experiences that are a joy to behold. Living your everyday life becomes a joy because you've started living your everyday life. Obviously, if you're living in the fog created by those 70,000 niggles, you're not really living at all. As I said a minute ago, effectively all you're doing is surviving. Some of those 70,000 niggles are bigger than others. Some of those 70,000 niggles give us our perceived inadequacies. Now, they are only perceptions. They're perceptions that we learned when we were young and impressionable, but that doesn't make them feel any less real during the course of what, as I said a few minutes ago, people have said to me, oh, let's come back down to the real world. Just because they're perceptions doesn't mean they don't feel real. Indeed, you will recollect that we talked a few weeks ago about stress. Stress has a real impact on the body. The fact that stress is imaginary, the fact that stress is something that you do to yourself by choosing not to be in control of your state of mind, because stress is an automated reaction. The fact that stress is your very own personal, imaginary reality doesn't mean that it doesn't have actual real life effects, because stress wrecks your cardiovascular system, your digestive system, and your immune system. So the fact that we are imagining stuff, the fact that we are being niggled at by the 70,000 repetitive thoughts in our own head. The fact that all that stuff is unreal doesn't mean that it doesn't have what feels like a real effect in our lives. And that's why people write to me and talk about fear, talk about panic. They talk about feeling low. They talk about needing to boost their self-esteem. We dealt with the notion, because that is all it is, of boosting your self-esteem a couple of episodes ago. And it's interesting because that is one of the most searched items in relation to people who want to change their lives. They want to start by changing how they view themselves. But as I said a couple of weeks ago, you don't need to boost your self-esteem. As I said a couple of minutes ago, you don't need to do anything other than take control of your state of mind, because when you do, it immediately changes your perspective and, most importantly, how you perceive yourself. But I want to come back to the title of this week's episode. Many, many years ago, I got an email from a worried parent. Think about that straight off. The parent was worried, and the email was about how their child was a great little worrier. That's a quote from the email. So this was a worrisome household. Why do you think the child was a great little worrier? Because they had picked it up from the worried parent. We don't lick stuff off the ground. We learn it from what we see and feel that's going on around us, particularly in our home, with our parents, with our siblings, and with our peers, in particular, as we've said before, during the third year of our lives. So this worried parent emailed me and asked if I worked with young children, because, as I said a moment ago, their child was, quote unquote, a great little warrior. Now, the interesting thing is that they were actually calling their child a great little warrior. They were describing their child as if it was some kind of badge of honor to other people as a great little warrior. Think about great, the word great. There's nothing great about using your mind to drag you down into stuff that you don't want to happen, because that's what worry is. Imagine investing your energy in stuff that you don't want to happen in your life. Imagine investing your energy in stuff that you dearly would love to avoid in your life. Imagine investing your energy in the exact opposite direction to the direction in which you would love your life to move forward. You don't need to imagine, because it is an everyday occupation of the normal mind. Indeed, it isn't just an occupation, it is a preoccupation, because the mind is preoccupied by those 70,000 niggles that we talked about a few minutes ago. You have a squatter in your attic. Your mind is preoccupied by stuff that is rattling around in your head, making you feel bad about yourself, and worse than that, investing your energy, your mental energy, actually your physical, vital energy, in what you do not want to happen. It comes naturally. It is a function of the brain that nature gave us, that developed through evolutionary times in a way that ensured that we stay on our toes in case our life is threatened. And generally speaking, in the modern age, our life is rarely threatened, if ever threatened. Most people will never come across a life-threatening situation. But the normal crazy mind is operating as if the boss that you don't like at work, that gives you a sick feeling in your stomach when you wake up in the morning, is a life-threatening situation. The guy pulling out in front of you in traffic when you're stuck in traffic and late for work is a life-threatening situation. This is the brain that nature gave you. This worry, this investment in what we don't want to happen, comes naturally. Now, people often say to me, oh, well, I wonder about the future, but all wonder leads to worry. The minute you start thinking about the future, you'll end up thinking about the future in negative terms. There is a story, a true story, in the online program, The Psychology of Success, that recounts what occurred with a client of mine when I was doing those 3-day one-to-one workshops that I mentioned a few minutes ago, back in Ireland in the 1990s. On the middle day, so we did Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. On the middle day, on the Wednesday, I would suggest to people when it came to lunchtime that after lunch they go out for a stroll. Now, generally speaking, a breath of fresh air will do you good during the course of the day. But actually, the instruction was that they go for a walk, to go for a walk. Now, people with whom I work will be familiar with this concept. Indeed, it is a concept that comes from Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk who set up Plum Village near Bordeaux in France. Going for a walk, to go for a walk. He has other such suggested exercises as well, like washing the dishes, to wash the dishes, or eating a tangerine, to eat a tangerine. In other words, one segment at a time, rather than when you have one segment in your mouth, you have the next 3 segments ready. Or washing the dishes, thinking about how you don't like washing the dishes and breaking one because your mind isn't on it, your mind is elsewhere. Indeed, your mind is rushed off into the future. You're going to rush washing the dishes so that you can do whatever you'd prefer to do after you've washed the dishes. In the same way, I would often suggest to people that they sip a cup of coffee, to sip a cup of coffee. Now, this may all sound puerile. It may sound very operational. It may sound that it has very little to do with one of the key things that I'm always talking about here, taking control of your state of mind, but it is at the heart of taking control of your state of mind. Because we need to live in the here and now. It's the only place and time where we can experience real reality. It is the only place and time that we actually have at our disposal to live. You can't live in the past, although most people's minds, through those 70,000 niggles, are buried in the past. And you can't live in the future because it isn't now. Neither past nor future is now. Now, unfortunately, the way the normal mind works means that the vast majority of our mental energy, a phrase that I've used a few times now in this particular episode, is invested in the past because those 70,000 thoughts enable us make it through the day. A smaller proportion of our mental energy is invested in the future. And once we start thinking about the future, as I said a couple of minutes ago, once we start wondering about the future, all wonder leads to worry. So we're off either in the past, using the past to enable us make it through the day to day, or our mind is off in the future worrying about what we don't want to happen, investing our energy in what we don't want to happen, and there's precious little of us, if any, available to be in the only place and time that we can be. You cannot put your best foot forward in your life in any other time or place but now. So if I'm sitting down to drink a cup of coffee, I better bloody drink the cup of coffee. If I'm going to hang the clothes on the clothesline, I better hang out the clothes. To hang out the clothes. Hang them out as if I mean it. Hang them out as if my life depends upon it, because in actual fact, it does. If I don't take the little everyday opportunities that my everyday life presents me with to pay attention to the reality of the here and now, to immerse myself in what I'm doing in the here and now, I've lost that here and now. I've missed my life in that moment. And not only that, it sets me up to miss my life in all the next nows that are coming down the track at me. If I start practicing paying my full attention to what I'm doing in the here and now, lo and behold, I take control of my state of mind. The thoughts that hold me back, the 70,000 thoughts that niggle at me every day, some of those thoughts dragging me off into a future that I don't want to happen through the process that we call everyday worry, those thoughts have no power over me anymore because the thoughts aren't real. The thoughts might create an illusion of reality, but the creation of that illusion is the result of my giving my attention automatically to the thoughts. The thoughts don't create my reality. My paying attention to the thoughts feeds the thoughts and creates what passes for my version of reality. When I start paying attention to what I'm actually doing, when I start giving an unusual amount of conscious attention to the task in hand, it's the definition of mindfulness, by the way. When I start doing that, there's none of my mental energy left available to feed the beast in my head, to feed the squatter in your attic, to feed those 70,000 thoughts. Those 70,000 thoughts have no power over you anymore. But as I said, I wanted to recount this story to you about how one thought will always lead to a negative thought. How wondering about the future will always lead to worrying about the future. How thinking is a bad thing, full stop. Now, before I go into this, many people have said to me, but surely positive thinking isn't a bad thing. It's still thinking. It's still taking you away from the reality of the here and now. Positive thinking is as destructive and corrosive as negative thinking. In fact, in many ways, it's actually worse. Negative thinking is built into us to ensure that we keep ourselves on our toes from the perspective of ensuring our survival. Positive thinking is delusional. And worse, when what you're thinking about positively doesn't come to pass, how could it? Because all you're doing is thinking about it rather than doing something about it. We lapse further into negative thought because the fact that what we're thinking positively about didn't come to pass means that we were right to think more negatively in the first place. It drags us further down into the abyss created by the little 70,000 niggles that are whizzing through your head every day. Anyway, back to Milltown Golf Club in South County Dublin in the late 1990s. 6 people are sat in a semicircle facing me in a quiet room close to the golf club bar. It's very important to have everything set up in the right way. Anyway, sorry, I digress. These people were asked to go to lunch. I went to lunch with them, but it was suggested that after lunch they go for a walk individually, just to go for a walk. And they were given the following set of instructions. I want you to go out and see, feel, hear, smell, and taste where you are. Now, again, this is the essence of mindfulness. We have 5 senses, I've just mentioned them, generally speaking, because our mental energy is subsumed by the 70,000 niggles in our head. We pay no attention whatsoever to what our 5 senses are actually telling us. John Kabat-Zinn in the University of Massachusetts Medical School, who devised mindfulness-based stress reduction therapy in the 1980s, called the process of being in the present moment coming to your senses. So these people were asked to go out and see, feel, hear, smell, and taste where they were. And once their mind wandered, because your mind will always wander, sorry, that's not true. The more you develop your ability to be present, the more you take control of your state of mind, the sooner your mind will stop wandering. It'll actually stop wandering. You'll just be in the present moment. You will be in what the University of Chicago has called, for many decades at this stage, a state of flow. When we flow, our mental energy flows, our vital energy flows, and it flows in tune with the flow of energy around us. That's why people who are in flow experience what normal people call coincidence, what people who are in flow know to be synchronicity. In other words, you stumble across the next things you need, the next people that you need to move your life forward effortlessly to create the kind of life and lifestyle that you would love to have. But anyway, back to my 6 people in Milltown Golf Club. We had our lunch. They went out for a walk. They were told to stroll rather than march. They were instructed that when their mind did wander, they were to come back to seeing, feeling, hearing, smelling, and tasting what they were experiencing in that order. I went back and sat in my room, meditated for a few minutes. Ooh, that's the first time I've used the M word in this particular episode. Anyway, we'll come back to it in a minute. After about 25 minutes, the first of the individuals came back, a guy called Donald. He came in, sat down in front of me, and I said to him, Donald, how did you get on? And he said, that was one of the most bizarre experiences of my life. He said, I'd actually go as far as to say that was one of the worst experiences of my life. He explained. He said, I went out for a walk, went out the front gate of the golf club. I walked down the hill towards the Dropping Well pub. Anybody who knows South County Dublin will know the Dropping Well pub at the bottom of the hill on the bridge at the River Dodder. He was walking down the hill and he said, I could see the beautiful blue sky and the white clouds floating across it. I could feel the breeze on my face and the sun on the back of my neck, the cool on my face, the warmth on my neck. I could feel my feet strike the pavement. I could hear the soles of my shoes on the pavement. I could see the leaves in the hedge as I walked past it. I could even see the little ridges, the little veins in the leaves on the hedge. I could hear that gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the big old trees down towards the river. I could see the trees' leaves dancing in the breeze. I could smell the fresh air. I could hear the birds singing. I could hear the hum of the tires of the passing cars on the surface of the road. I could smell the fumes from the cars. I could see the sun glance off the chrome on the cars or the paintwork of the cars as they passed by. And a red BMW passed by, and I said to myself, ooh, that's a nice car. Now he's not paying attention anymore. Now he's not seeing, feeling, hearing, smelling, and tasting where he is anymore. Now he's thinking about something. That's a nice car is judgment. And by way of an important digression, we must remember that the definition of mindfulness is deliberately paying an unusual amount of conscious attention to the reality of the present moment non-judgmentally. Because when we start judging, we get back into the world of thought. Once we get into the world of thought, all thought leads to overthinking, leads to negative thinking, leads to our investing our energy in what we don't want to happen. In other words, worry. Ooh, that's a nice car. The next thought, because thoughts travel in packs of 20, they're like cigarettes, they're very bad for you. The next thought that latched on to the first one was, I fancy myself in that car. Then he said to himself, well, actually, there's a BMW dealer at the top of the hill, the other side of the river. If we finish up early this evening, I might go in there and look to see if they have a car like that. He said, I might even sit in the car. He said to himself, I might even get a test drive. Now, they're all positive thoughts, aren't they? But it exemplifies the point that I was making a few minutes ago in relation to the stupidity of thinking at all, the stupidity of investing our energy in positive thoughts when we know where they lead. So he had decided that if our workshop on that Wednesday ended early, he would hop into the dealership at the top of the hill and sit in one of those cars, or perhaps make an appointment for a test drive. The next thought that came into his head was, why are you annoying yourself with thoughts like that when you're supposed to be seeing, feeling, hearing, smelling, and tasting where you are? Now, that was an opportunity for him to come back to reality. But instead, the thought kept on rolling, as thoughts do. Why are you annoying yourself with thoughts like that when you know you couldn't afford a car like that? Not only do you know you couldn't afford a car like that, but you know that actually you can't really afford the holiday that you've just paid a deposit for. Worse than that, think about it. Your spending is getting a little bit out of control as your business is not doing very well at the moment. What if business continues going the way it's going at the moment? Not only will you not be able to afford a car like that, not only will you not be able to afford the holiday that you booked, you won't be able to pay the girls' school fees when it comes to September. Worse than that, if things really go down the toilet, you won't be able to pay the mortgage and you'll end up homeless. He said to me, I went from admiring a car to being homeless in the twinkle of an eye. Is that how mad I am? And of course, the answer is that's how mad we all are when we're not in control of our own state of mind. Our mind runs away with us. The minute we start thinking about the future, we're inevitably going to end up thinking negatively about the future. Because even when we were young and impressionable, we were predisposed to taking more negative psychological snapshots than positive ones, because being negative thinking keeps us on our toes, as we said a few minutes ago, from the perspective of survival. All wondering about the future leads to worrying about the future. Or, as we said earlier on, investing your vital energy in what you do not want to happen. The definition of madness. Is this something that you are doing every day? The short answer is yes. But more often than not, you won't be aware of it because, as we said earlier on, when our mind is operating on automatic pilot, this stuff is just going on without our being aware at all. We're dead to the world. We're missing in action. We're not experiencing the reality of the here and now. We're missing our own lives. Can you stop it? If it's natural, if it is the normal way the brain that nature gave us operates, is there anything we can do about it? And the short answer is obviously yes. You're a responsible adult, aren't you? Can't you take responsibility for what's going on in your own head? Or more to the point, take responsibility for that to which you pay attention. Automatically, we pay attention to the thoughts. That's a given. If we train ourselves to pay attention to something else, we starve the thoughts of that which gives them life. They no longer have our attention, and without our attention, those thoughts are nothing. There's only one thing worth paying attention to in your life. It's not your plans for the future, because as we said a minute ago, if you start thinking about the future, you'll end up worrying about the future. It's not your goals or objectives. As people have said to me, I have been living my life looking forward to my goals and objectives, which means I'm in a constant state on an everyday basis of dissatisfaction. The only thing you can actually pay attention to is the here and now, because it's the only thing that's real. It's the only place you are. It's the only place you'll discover who you really are. The only thing that you can pay attention to is what is before you right here, right now. To paraphrase a conversation I had with a one-to-one client on Zoom a couple of months ago, you can only play the ball that is currently at your feet. You can only do what you have to do now. And if that is sipping a cup of coffee, as I said a few minutes ago, you better do it as if your life depends upon it, because it actually does. If that is going for a walk, to go for a walk, you better go and see, feel, hear, smell, and taste each moment, because your life is made of moments called nows. Once we begin to develop our ability to pay attention to the reality of the here and now, the way in which our mind previously and automatically operated begins to grind to a halt, to the point where eventually your mind will not become distracted. Your mind will not wander back into the past. Your mind will certainly not wander into and wonder and worry about the future. You'll simply be in that state that I mentioned a few minutes ago, that flow state, where you're just doing what you're doing. And because you're doing it free of thought and free of worry and free of the anchor that is provided by the 70,000 thoughts coming from the past, free of all of that, you will just do what you're doing, and it'll be effortless and it'll be a joy. And you will know, because you're present in the here and now, that you're doing the right thing in the right way at the right time. And as I said, that could be as apparently small as washing the dishes. There's no such thing as a small now. There's no such thing as an insignificant task. There's no such thing as an insignificant now, because now is your life. Full stop. Now, you can't suddenly decide, I'm only going to pay attention to the here and now. Look what happened to my friend when he was walking down the hill from the gate of Milltown Golf Club. You can't simply decide against the habit of not just your adult lifetime of paying attention to the 70,000 niggles in your head. It's not just the habit of your adult lifetime. It's the product of 1.8 million years evolution of your brain. So you can't just say, I'm not going to do that anymore. You need to retrain yourself to pay attention to the reality of the present moment. Now, I said retrain. You're not going to have to learn anything new, because we were experts, adepts at this when we were 2 or 3 years old. You just need to go back to that childlike state Obviously, that's completely different from childish. In fact, most people operating on automatic pilot being niggled by those 70,000 thoughts every day, they're awful childish. They're not behaving like responsible adults. But we need to go back to being childlike, to simply paying attention to the ball at our feet, to simply paying attention to the reality of the present moment. But the really interesting thing is that there is one scientifically validated way of doing this. And as things stand, there is only one scientifically validated way of doing this, and that is meditation. What is even more interesting is that not only will meditation stop mental distraction, not only will meditation blow stress out of the water, you won't suffer from stress anymore when you're in the present moment. Not only will meditation enable you stop investing your energy in things that you don't want to happen, by virtue of the fact that you're investing your energy in the here and now, meditation will enable you ensure that you only do what you need to do in the here and now and move your life effortlessly forward. More than that, because I talked about 1.8 million years evolution a minute ago. You don't need to fight that 1.8 million years. Meditation will restructure the brain that evolution gave you. You will take charge of your own personal evolution, and your brain will be structured in a different way to the brains of those who don't meditate, enabling you know what's going on in real time. You won't need the benefit of hindsight anymore. Knowing what you need to do in the moment, knowing what the right things are to do, and obviously what you should avoid doing because they would be the wrong things to do, knowing how to say the right thing without fear nor favor, simply effortlessly doing what you need to do to move you forward to a life that is best for you. Now, I mean that in the grandest possible way. I don't mean that, oh, you'll accept what's best for you because, you're a hopeless sinner in need of redemption. That's not what I mean. I mean that you will get all good things. And the interesting thing is that when we are in that zone, when we are in flow, as so many online program owners have said to me, what's best for me just feels like it falls into my lap. Now, it feels that way because there's no effort involved, because the only effort you are struggling with in your life is effort that is created by the way in which your normal mind works. Effort is the product of thinking in exactly the same way as stress is the product of thinking, in exactly the same way as worry and the waste of worry is simply the product of thinking. Stop thinking. Grow up. Come to your senses. Take charge of your own state of mind. Change your perspective and understanding of who you are. You'll get in touch with your own gut instinct, your intuition. And that instinct will guide you moment to moment to enable you experience a life that the 70,000 niggles couldn't even begin to imagine.
You've been listening to Succeed, Just Let Go. To get involved, join me in my Facebook group, strangely enough called To Succeed, Just Let Go. And for more information, visit www.willie-horton.com.